Stats SA has published its first migration profile report. The report comes as a consequence of the work and engagements conducted by the Migration and Urbanisation Forum, which was launched in August of 2022. To unpack the report further is Diego Iturralde. He is Stats SA Demography and Population Statistics Chief Director. Diego, good evening and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. Thank you for having me, and good evening to the viewers.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So, the migration topic, Diego, continues to elicit passionate views, whether you're talking about the depletion of human capital in the country, with many moving to Australia and now Dubai, or those from the SADC region choosing SA as their preferred permanent residence. Now, you have published an official migration report. Firstly, what necessitated the compilation of this data?
I think if we look back to 2018, South Africa was one of the signatories to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. And in this Global Compact, one of the objectives was to improve migration data in all its forms. So in order to do this, a recommendation was made globally that countries should produce what we call a migration profile report. So this report is as a consequence of that agreement that South Africa signed, and many other countries around the world also signed. And South Africa now joins over 100 countries around the world that have put together this migration profile report.
All right, so then to the report itself, it comprises of 3 parts. Talk us through these.
Okay, so the first part really looks at a quantitative assessment around migration. What are the data, what are the trends? Migration is, of course, a multifaceted phenomenon with lots of different themes. So we are looking at that. The second part looks at the impact of migration. How has migration impacted various parts of society? So this is more of a research-based part of the report, where we see what does the research say, how has migration impacted society. And the final part, which is still to be released, will be an assessment of migration governance and where should we be going in terms of how migration is regulated in the country.
Okay, so more of a comprehensive report around recommendations of where to from now.
Certainly.
I want us to be a bit more granular and perhaps look at general cross-mobility figures, because they piqued my interest. It was quite interesting and almost even self-explanatory to a certain extent when I saw that there was less mobility between 2020 and 2021, obviously because of COVID. But perhaps you can take us through that data.
Yeah, so I think that mobility around the world slowed down a lot during 2020-21. So a lot of the data sources that we speak to, whether they be administrative sources coming from specific government departments or international agencies, or even from Statistics South Africa's household surveys or population census, most certainly would show a slowdown in the movement of various different types of categories of people at that time. Even internally, even within the country, people moving province to province at that time also showed a market slowdown, and I think we're in the middle of that recovery from the COVID-19 years.
And then immigration versus emigration, what are the trends there that you've seen?
In terms of immigration, we've seen that South Africa's migrant stock is at about 2.4 million persons. In other words, that's the total number of migrants or people born outside the country that we see in the country. Overwhelming majority are coming from SADC countries, in particular Zimbabwe, Mozambique and Lesotho, and Malawi also has significant numbers. And this is not any different to what we saw in the past. In terms of emigration, I think a lot of interest
Pardon me for interjecting there, but just before we get to emigration, I just wanted to know then, with the immigration, if you're saying it's mostly those from the SADC region, where in particular are we seeing them the most? Is it perhaps here in Gauteng or other provinces?
Yes. So I think that traditionally the majority of them are attracted to Gauteng. There is, however, a a suggestion that people are beginning to view the Western Cape as a more attractive option amongst some people. But I think that historically and even now in 2022, we are still seeing that the majority of international migrants are choosing Gauteng because of its opportunities that it offers.
And then on the front of immigration, what are we seeing? Because there's this big debate that are we still seeing large numbers of skills leaving the country? Or as some analysts are beginning to say that more of them now are discovering that opportunities or conditions are not that favorable out there and are returning back home.
Yeah, so when it comes to immigration, we are not measuring this, but we are reliant on the population censuses that other countries conduct where they count South Africans. So in this regard, in 2020, the UN Population Division estimated about 914,000 South Africans living outside of South Africa. And this can be a mix of people. It can be students, it can be professionals, excuse me. It can be professionals who are working outside the country. It can be young people looking for opportunity. So it's a wide variety of people who may be outside the country. And I think that we are seeing the majority of them in countries like the United Kingdom, the US, Canada, Australasia, and even more recently in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. In terms of how much this is changing or what the changing patterns are, I am aware of certain reports indicating that some South Africans are beginning to return and are using their savings to buy into high-end property, especially in the Western Cape. However, this is something that is quite recent, and until we see this in data, we need to measure this at a later point in time. So I think next time that we count migration or that we measure migration, we would be able to confirm whether we see an inflow of returning South Africans to certain parts of the country or whether the patterns have remained the same.